We're now in a position to look again at the curve sketching, the quadratic function, because we've got the complete method for completing the square when the coefficient of x squared is no longer 1. And the method is very similar to what we've done already with a coefficient of x squared 1, but the numbers just get a little bit more awkward, and some people panic a little bit when they get unusual answers in a question and spend more time worrying about whether they've got it right or not than perhaps they ought to. So these examples here are deliberately aimed at showing you that you will not always be given a question that produces some nice numbers, okay? So please don't expect that. In fact, in a way, a lot of the questions in A-level nowadays are deliberately producing numbers that are a bit awkward just to make you feel that perhaps you haven't got the right answer. So let's take our first example, the 2x squared minus 3x minus 7. So we use the general method then for completing the square, which you should by now be much more comfortable with. So we will take out the 2. In other words, we will divide by 2, and then remember the method then tells me to halve the number of x's. So if I halve 3 over 2, I get 3 over 4. It then tells me to square 3 over 4 and take it away, so that's 9 over 16, and the 7 over 2 there. Now, you need to be, again, confident with the fractions. What are you thinking of here? Well, we need a common denominator of 16. So we need 9 over 16, and we need to multiply top and bottom by 8. So that's 56 over 16. 56 and 9 is 65 over 16. Remember, you probably haven't got a calculator in this exam. So when I multiply the 2 out, I have 2x minus 3/4 squared. I'm going to multiply that by 2, which makes the bottom line 8. So that's completed the square. Now I'm going to use that to draw a proper sketch. Now remember that a sketch mustn't just show the shape, it will have to show key points on the graph. So let's look at some, first of all, very obvious one. If x is 0, y is negative 7. So we know that there's going to be a crossing point there on the y-axis. The symmetry of the graph is from this bracket here. So if x is 3/4, we have the line of symmetry. Mark that on there. If x equals 3/4, the whole of this is 0, and we have the lowest point of minus 65 over 8, which is just a little bit more than 8. So we end up with the lowest point as 3/4 minus 65 over 8. So that gives us a pretty good idea now, doesn't it, of what this graph looks like. So it goes up here and it goes up there. And the question may well say, find the points of intersection with the x-axis. So that's when y is 0. So we put this equal to 0. So 2x minus 3/4 squared must equal 65 over 8. Divide by 2, which is 65 over 16. Then take the square root of each side, so x take 3/4, And remember the plus or minus, well, 65 hasn't got a square root, it's just going to be a third. Square root of 65. 16, of course, has got a square root. So add the 3/4 to the other side, and I end up with the two solutions of 3 plus or minus, and they're both over 4, so let's put the 4 there. So that this will be the biggest value, which is 3 plus root 65 over 4, and this one will be the smallest value, which is 3 minus root 65 over 4. So there we've got our complete sketch. It's got all of the detail on it that we might be asked. We've got the intersection with the x-axis, intersection with the y-axis, symmetry, and the lowest point. And it's all come from our completing the square. So this is very, very powerful. Okay, let's move on to the second example then. So I've cleaned the board here from the first one. And again, our coefficient of x squared is no longer 1, and it's a negative number. So I'm going to divide by -3. And if I divide by -3, I get x squared. -6 divided by -3 is plus 2. 1 divided by -3 is -1/3. Carry on with the usual method, halve the number of x's, square that number and take it away again, and pop back in the number that we've already got there. A little bit easier to simplify this one, because that's 1 1/3, isn't it, which is 4 over 3. And then put the -3 back. -3 times -4/3 is plus 4. And if you remember in the previous lesson, I suggested that when this is negative, we tend to write this the other way round at the end and put the x part second. Okay, so there we've completed the square. So that's the same function written in a different way. Now let's try and sketch this one. So what are the key points here? Well, if x is 0, then y is 1. So that's a very easy point to find. Look at this bracket here. If x is -1, we get the line of symmetry. So that's -1. Now this time, because the coefficient of x squared is negative, we know that the graph is going to be the other way round. It's going to be a parabola up this way. And if x is -1, all of that disappears, and we have the highest point when y is 4. So the highest point is going to be -1, 4. And so the graph is something like that. Nearly like a parabola, but that's not too bad. And now we want to find these points. A bit short there, let's extend it a bit. So how would we find those points? Well, that's when y is 0. So let's go to this. So 4 will have to equal 3 times x plus 1 squared. Divide by 3. X plus 1 squared is 4 over 3. Now this time, square root each side. 4's okay, isn't it? That's 2. But on the bottom, we haven't got a decent square root at all. we need really to do something about that. That's, you know, it's bad practice to leave surds on the bottom line. So let's just have a look at this, 2 over root 3. Now, if you think back to the work we've done on surds, how would we get rid of that root 3? Well, we would multiply top and bottom line by root 3, and we would get 2 root 3 over 3. So the final answer then, putting the 1 onto the other side, down here this becomes minus 1, so x equals minus 1 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 3. I'm a little nervous about that as an answer because this is a whole number, this has got a fraction in it. I would prefer you to write the 1 as 3 over 3, and then I can write this as a single line. I think that looks better. So I would rather we write this as negative 3 plus or minus 2 root 3 all over 3, because I think that that makes it easier to indicate this point here will be negative 3 plus 2 root 3 over 3. And this point here will be negative 3 minus 2 root 3 over 3. Make that a bit clearer if I can. Okay. So my answers are not nice, you might want to say, but then they're just as good a numbers as anything else. In fact, it's a surd. It doesn't matter. But again, see how the completing the square method takes us through and does the work for you. Okay. So best of luck with these then. They need a little bit of practice, but you should be able to cope with those all right.